Oh, hello and greetings. Welcome to another episode of VGA Fireside. My name is Chaz Evans, and I am Director of Exhibitions for VGA Gallery, a non-for-profit based in Chicago that supports artists who make video games. I'm here to kick off another episode where we have a great, new, exciting guest to talk about video games with. But before we begin, as always, we would like to thank some people because gratitude is the true path. First, I want to thank producer and director of operations for VGA, Bryce Poles, and I want to thank designer and director of communications for VGA, Eleanor Schichtel. We want to thank the entire VGA staff and VGA board for all the hard work they put into keeping the organization running. I want to thank the Independent Game Designers Association Chicago chapter. Thank you, Ross, for helping spread the word. And I want to thank you for tuning in. Wherever you are, I'm so glad you could join us. I'm going to thank Electric Mirrors for providing the very groovy intro music that you were just enjoying. And I want to thank the Oldham Music Center Youth Brass Band for the fanfare that you're about to experience. Before we start, if you would know of an organization or group that would be interested in this program or have any feedback at all, please drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would very much love to hear from you. So that's all my thank yous. And you know what that means? It means it's time for Bryce to hit us with the VGA Fireside fanfare. Yes, triumphant, bright, and soaring. The fanfare has played, and therefore another episode of VGA Fireside has begun. Let me please introduce today's guests. VGA Gallery welcomes Kara Stone for this special episode of VGA Fireside. Kara is an artist and scholar interested in the affective and gendered experiences of psychosocial disability, debility, and healing, as it relates to art production, and particularly video games. Stone's most recent game, Unearth You, is available now on a variety of platforms. And her 2018 game, The Earth is a Better Person Than Me, was featured in the Video Game Art Gallery exhibition, Polymorphism, Queer Encounters of Intimacy in Games. Everyone at home, please help me welcome Kara Stone to VGA Fireside. Hello.
Hi, so happy to be here. That fanfare was so great. It's so exciting.
It's stirring, isn't it?
Yes, I feel very stirred.
Hi. So thanks so much for joining us. And I guess I want to start things off by congratulating you about your evolution to being a doctor of philosophy and assistant professor. These are recent exciting things. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Very recent.
Yeah. There are a number of, I hope people walking different paths who enjoy watching this program, but I know many people who join us are students or other people looking to get into the field of video games. So I like to start these conversations off just knowing about, beginnings and origin stories. So if you don't mind, Kara, could you share with us how you got involved with video game production in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. I think unlike a lot of students now, at that time, or back when I was growing up, I didn't really realize that it could be a career path for me or a artistic endeavor or anything. I'd always been in the arts. Like I went to an art high school and then I did a BFA in the arts and then I was starting my master's, and it wasn't until midway through my master's that I encountered people who made independent games. Like I hadn't even heard of them. And this was maybe 2013. And I was like, oh my God, I can make video games. Like I loved video games growing up, and I was doing film production and started making interactive video art, which is just only a short step away from video games. And so once I realized it was a thing, I kind of like just completely pivoted my master's thesis, like my art discipline. I was just like really excited about it and liked making games and exploring them and learning about them. So yeah, I was probably like still relatively young, maybe 25 or 26 when I started making games. Yeah. And
you were already a part of a master's program. You said you came across just the very idea that individuals or small teams could just go ahead and make your own games. You're just like, we're changing everything.
Yeah, and I was in Toronto at the time, and there was like a independent game scene there, and so I started like meeting people and still have like friends and community there. That's
terrific. When you mentioned the sort of interactive video pieces you were working on right before, or perhaps sort of during this pivot or this evolution, at this point, do you still feel like those are interactive videos, or do they all sort of fall together into a larger category of video game art?
Oh, I don't know. Gosh, the definition and what's what, I don't know.
I know. So that's perhaps too early, or perhaps should never with these sort of categorical questions. We can move on from that one. If it's not really an interesting springboard. Something just tells me there's probably more relationships than there are distinctions. So anyway, if you're already working in an academic setting, I wanted to ask about your relationship with writing and scholarship, and at what point can you identify that your writing practice intersected with the work in games? Did one exist before the other? Did they both sort of emerge at the same time? What's the relationship between the two?
Yeah, because I had already been like both in my undergrad and then my master's writing about my own artwork and writing about others' artwork, and mostly in like film. I continued when making games to write mostly from a position of artist scholarship. So I write a lot about making my own games. I also write about just like design philosophy in general, or creative philosophy. More than like, analyzing other people's games or game culture or something. It's mostly from the position of artist and creator.
So you are making games. The act of making a game is research or producing information in the world, and that is then the sort of base of research that you can then write a paper about or a chapter about.
Yeah, that's the theory behind it. But I feel like I mostly, maybe this is not a great thing to say to a fellow academic, or if there's any academics in the audience.
We want the unvarnished truth on this show, Kara, please. Go ahead.
I really consider like my art practice pretty separate from my academic side. And I always kind of wanted to have the goal of making pieces that weren't just serving the academic interests, and they're like available to the public and can be consumed by people without reading my like accompanying essay about it, you know, that like can be made sense of without it. So I like make games, and then I can use them for a springboard for writing about later. But sometimes, like with Unearth You, I kind of made these like principles that I was going to follow in making the game that, you know, a lot of artists are writing manifestos and making it. So it was kind of along that vein about trying to make something with specific rules that we can get into later when we talk about the piece.
Sure. It's you said, yeah, it's important that the work has entrances, points of entry that do not require an accompanying work of scholarship. But you mentioned that as, you know, like maybe the players of games expect some sort of accompanying writing to explain things. I feel like when academic people in games intersect, it's usually the other way around, where it's not the game players that need an extra treatise to understand what's going on, but academics who need an essay because they're perhaps gobsmacked or intimidated by playing a video game.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think you gave us some good early signposts for how you got into games. I think it was probably a good time to just look at your work. So I would like to see if we can get first of all, I'm going to ask you, is it okay if we share a demo of Unearth You, your latest project?
Yes, definitely. Okay. Please do.
And okay. I think super producer Bryce is helping us out here running Unearth You live, and then we can see it happening, and we can talk as much or as little as Kara would like.
Hi there, I'm Kara. I'm here to guide you on your journey of self-discovery and self-expansion.
So it starts with a little tutorial, which this is, and Kara is introducing herself.
You by Further, a new startup dedicated to using technology for human betterment. Its innovators and CEOs Edmus Fuller and Zachary Sutchers programmed me to showcase artificial empathy and spread motivational systems to the wider world. Over the next 7 days, you and I will track your habits, exercise your brain, calm your parasympathetic nervous system, train your amygdala, expand your lung capacity, delve into deep-set thought patterns, and unearth hidden power you never knew you had. All it takes is logging onto this app once a day over 7 days. How easy is that? Here are the inspiration videos from Further, which exhibit an array of motivational food for thought on multiple aspects of our world. Here's where our discussions happen. Using deep learning technology and my advanced artificial intelligence, I provide various personal lectures to you each day on different approaches to living a vibrant life. This section consists of meditative breathwork that will illuminate every inch of your body with fresh oxygen. Here is your reflection journal. It will provide you with a new writing prompt each day that urges you into a deeper knowing of yourself. And finally, this is your habit tracker, where I give you some daily tasks to accomplish outside our in-app time together. They will provide additional support for your mental and physical well-being and will be key to your progress. And that is it. I suggest to follow this order each day, but it is completely up to you to find what pattern works best for your individual experience. If you go through each of these sections,
excuse me, Kara, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Next week, I'm confident you will be a more focused, more productive, more grateful and loving human being.
at a description of what we're looking at, we've been introduced to Care and a product of Further. Care is a green figure who keeps moving, always dancing. Some sort of gesture, some sort of figurative motion, and has introduced us to the Unearth You program, which will take place over 7 days.
Yeah, so that's kind of what Kara was saying, was introducing the general concept of this app, which is made by this fictional company called Further, who are based in Silicon Valley. And we see Care here, who's a 3D model, and her skin is made from film of nature. It's like green plants and like flowing. And around her are these little icons where you go into the kind of the different levels. I mean, levels is very extremely in quotes here. And you're supposed to go through this each day over 7 days. And, you know, that's like the key to unlock happiness, according to Further, who made this app. So if we go into the first one, Inspiration, which is in the top right, we have a little video introduction from Further, the company, who kind of sets up some themes and ideas that take place within the game. Or it should. This is off YouTube. So I don't know, Bryce, if something's going on of connecting to your YouTube through the game. But you also have the link if you want to show that.
If we're stuck on a loading screen here, we could also just try to fire off one of the other quote unquote levels, like the.
The other one, the meditation, also works off of like a YouTube embed.
Oh, I see.
Just because the video files are pretty big.
Or we can meditate by watching this flower. bloom There we go. We're back. So, let's just, Bryce, would you mind clicking on the discussion level? Is that okay if we try that one out? Kara?
Hello.
Yeah, with me, yes.
Your topics for today.
So here in the discussion is where a lot of, along with the inspiration, a lot of like the narrative happens. So as much as it's like marketed as this self-care game, there is a narrative that unfolds over the 7 days, and you get to know more about Care, how she was created, and Further, the company that made her. And so kind of operating like a visual novel, you have like 3 different topic choices for that day that she tells you about. Go into any of them.
We are going to create something very special together. We are going to create an Unearth You. We are not creating a whole new version of yourself, but instead
For those who are being introduced to Unearth You for the first time, I think it should be made abundantly clear when we say 7 days, it's not 7 fictive days within the story of a video game, but 7 of your days.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game will lock you out once you have completed the day's activities, and you can't log in until the next calendar day.
It is waiting for you. Think of it as creating the right environment and space for you to blossom and develop, not redesigning the material of the seed. I will get to know you much better. So
enjoyers of the game allowed to go through the Unearth You program again after going through the 7-day program?
Yeah, there's actually, after the 7 days, there is different content for, I hate to say the word content, can't believe I said it, but there's different content from the day 8 onwards. Yeah, so the game changes a bit.
We have, at many VGA staff meetings, have strained to find a synonym for content when we're trying to talk something, we're trying to avoid it so desperately, and we never can. We still end up landing on the term content. I understand the impulse. Sorry.
There's a different experience after the first 7 days.
Perfect.
They say they conceived the idea for me in a small garage in my founder's rented apartment in sunny Northern California. walking distance away from the South Arc of the Bay. They say they finessed me over years, with many unpromising demos, wireframes and broken prototypes and multiple user tests, my sisters with short lives, hidden in data centers far away from you and me. They say they finally found just the right ones and just the right zeros to make me, the perfect me. So here I am.
So there's short speeches, treatises, or monologues, all these terms you might use in the discussion section. Kara, would you prefer the bright switch over to the video so we can see the inspiration section, or should we still click around in the other?
Yeah, it would be cool we can watch the introduction video.
Right. Yeah, please, Bryce. Fire up the introduction video whenever you're ready. So that was the game being played live. And here.
Welcome to the beginning of your new life. We at Further are so proud of you. Just by downloading our app and committing to 7 days together, you have already taken the biggest, hardest step. This 1-week program is designed to support you in living your life on the highest plane of existence. In the modern age, it's hard to find time and energy to work on yourself. That's why we have condensed years of wellness training into a series of short but extremely potent mind and body exercises. The CEOs at Further have a combined 30 years of researching the best deep learning systems for human betterment. Our knowledge has culminated in our artificial intelligence named CARE, and our self-discovery program she guides you through. She is designed to be your personal life coach, dispensing mindful exercises, guided reflections, and lectures on a range of topics such as body image, the equanimous mind, everyday utopia, and increased productivity.
It's interesting that Further generated an AI
love her as much as you do,
but then didn't hire an actor to introduce the AI, but also use a generative voice to advertise.
To the bountiful potential buried inside you, simply waiting for the space to expand.
Yeah, so one of the rules that I set for myself when making this is that I would only use found footage, found everything. And so that means, like, you can see here, this clearly has like a found footage aesthetic, a lot from like the 60s and 70s, nature documentaries, and but that goes beyond just the visuals within the video pieces. Like Care's skin is from like a nature documentary, but also the 3D model is a found 3D model that already existed on the internet. All of the voiceover is text-to-speech software. The icons are taken from like a plant medicine book that was made in the 1800s. And when I was started making Unearth You, I was just really stuck being like, wouldn't it be better for the environment if I just didn't make anything? You know, wouldn't it just be so much better? And I know that whatever I make is so small in comparison to like AAA studios or even major studios or technology companies, of the destruction that they do to the environment. But I really felt like I'd be participating in like this newness, making more stuff, make everything again from scratch. So it's just like an ethos that I tried to follow to be able to come to terms with like how to make art right now, how to make digital art right now. So yeah, really trying to do this ethos of recycling or composting, reusing things already on the internet.
And it, of course, comes together as a very consistent visual and sonic style on its own. But, you know, while doing so, yeah, you create this, it has this sort of challenge of like, don't we have enough media? Right. Like, we have enough laying around. Maybe we can put down our cameras, and if we had to make new media, we can do this by remixing and recycling what's already out there.
Yeah.
I
feel like I'm going to stick with it for a while.
Yeah. I hope you do. So this wasn't a question we talked about earlier, but I sort of want to talk about the tension between care and the further corporation. But let's talk about structure first, and hopefully we can get there. So we mentioned this is a 7-day game. There's 7 acts, and they're synced to your real-time system clock. And another project that I hope we get to take a look at later, Ritual of the Moon, is also based on real time. So I just wanted to ask, in general, what is it about this multi-day approach towards structuring a video game project what goals does it support?
Yeah. So this is Ritual of the Moon and Unearth You are both like durational projects, or as I would describe them as durational. Like many video games take like 80 hours to play or go on indefinitely. It's not like this entirely radical new idea, or video games that you're supposed to play every day, like Animal Crossing, New Leaf, or, I guess the Animal Crossing series. And I was particularly interested for both of them. They're both like about self-reflection at their core, and trying to meditate on our emotional state and well-being and kind of keep track of that over time, like kind of like a journal. And also that both are primarily designed for phones, although it can be played on computers. And regardless, like we're on our phones every day. Well, I don't even know. I think everybody are on their phones every day, probably, and on our computers. And it's like this device that we visit and visit again and again. And if you're like me, and again and again and again, and are pretty addicted. And so I wanted to also explore like what I'm already going to this device multiple times a day. What can I do that makes it feel nice, or makes me reflect on my state, or makes me put down my phone too? That's not like an indefinite ongoing game like we see from a lot of mobile games or AAA games. They just, shoot right through. So having like built-in breaks and pauses that are kind of forcing you to like disengage with the piece and take time away for reflection, I think like really fit with the larger themes of both of these pieces, which is about reflection on the self and on society and emotional well-being.
And for those who haven't tried it yet, Care does send you push notifications if you're playing this on phone. So it absolutely is built with that phone context in mind, and finding a way to have this experience be integrated in the pauses and breaks of the other things you're doing in the day. But I would also have to say alongside that unlike many other phone-based games, it's not meant to hold all of the breaks of your day, right? Then send you a push notification over and over and over again, trying to get your eyeballs back to that application as much as possible. Quite the opposite. Would you feel like this is the case? You get one push notification a day, right? And so you're basically trying to make sure that the Care enters your life only once in like a 24-hour cycle?
That's right. And for Unearth You, there's about like 20 minutes of gameplay at a higher end, and that's all you can access during the day. You go into like the reflections and the rituals tab on the screen. You can kind of see like you don't have to do everything all at once. Like you can come back to it, but in the daily rituals, Care gives you a few rituals that you're supposed to do outside of app time. So the first ones are 3 deep breaths and then write a gratitude list. And not to like spoil too much about what happens, but this one is when it's just that this list grows bigger and bigger and bigger to a point where even by day 4, it's basically impossible to do all of those things without dedicating like over an hour or more of your life to these like self-care activities. And a lot of this game that you follow through Care and her story and in this rituals part is about like perfectionism within like the self-care and health and wellness world. And so on day 4, care kind of intervenes and changes what these rituals look like. But at first, like, you know, these first 2 seem like, okay, great advice, care, I can do that. But when you start to have like 10 of these different things going on, it becomes like really unattainable. But yeah, you can come back to this screen and like put in, you know, check it off whenever you've done it. And then if we go to the reflections tab,
His ways to write,
each
or
day,
he applies his voice to text. The first things that come to mind from reading the daily prompt: no overthinking, no perfection, let it flow freely.
so CARE gives you a writing prompt, a journal prompt, 1 a day. So you can go into that any time of the day and write your response to it. And there's only 1, like you don't say, and I'm done, and like give me another journal prompt, or like I'm gonna do 20 at once or whatever. You know, there's 1 a day that is given.
I was curious about if you, Kara Stone, have any access to the content sent in through these the journaling level, or the this is completely just a part of the user's experience.
I don't go look at people's journal entries, and I didn't make a system where I can go do it either.
Yeah.
I also like, you know, just having one of the, maybe you want to, what am I trying to say? Like trying to reuse or let go or non-archive things, like you can write something and have it just be gone, rather than write your feelings, rather than write it and then, you know, have it as an archive of your feelings, which can be useful too, but that's not what's going on here.
Yeah, when I was using this section, I didn't suspect that this was, you know, all being collected in a database and on your own personal laptop or anything, but being a general, just being so used to the training we have to expect that our data is being gleaned through most applications we use, I sort of still had that feeling maybe it was, you know.
Yeah, or that nothing's really gone. But as far as I know, this is actually really gone.
Okay, good. So you mentioned how like things change. There's these big promises at first, and care changes and evolves the tenor of the whole program on day 4. I would argue that, especially for, you know, for most viewer, or maybe just an intuitive viewer who enjoys sci-fi and is familiar with, you know, the image of those in technology and power who make a lot of promises that they don't always end up being quite what it seems, right? You could sort of glean that might be the case even from day 1, not just from the sort of alienated stance that the CEOs of Further have here, but also just from some of the inflections and comments from Care, and even on the first day. And at the same time, we can click on that meditation button. We are doing some things that are genuinely calming.
Yeah, I don't know if the meditation will work though if the video streaming is not linked.
So we're drawing attention to it.
Side note of like technology not lasting very long. There's this plugin we're using, and now I'm suspicious that it is gone out of date. So will be fixed very soon. Yeah. But in this, I can describe what happens in this meditation, which is that there's like each day there's a different 2 to 3 minute meditation where Care instructs you to breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out, and kind of a very like different states that are based on like pranayama, or different time lengths based on pranayama. And yeah, those meditations change like every day. And yeah, so I was one of the things that I was always really confused about this piece was like how to advertise it. Not that I know how to advertise anything, like it's not what I do or what am I interested in, but even how to like talk about it, because I think a lot of people might assume that it's really critical of like the wellness world, or making fun of people who are in the wellness world. And in some ways it is, but I'm also really deeply invested in that world and really a part of it. And a lot of this is coming from my own experiences there. And it's still, if you play through until the end, it still has a real dedication to the idea of healing and repair, and trying genuinely to find a way of doing that through technology and through reflection and through like connection. And so there's this like playing between what are the promises of self-care that a company in Silicon Valley might try to sell, and what are the actual practices that Care herself goes through that are actually really difficult and messy and not marketable in the way that, you know, a quick 7 days to heal everything in your life is as marketable. So there's this kind of interplay between the two as Care goes on her own healing journey where she discovers a lot about her past and why she came to be.
That answers the question that's simmering on my mind. When I play this game and an enjoyer of sci-fi, but also a user of meditative and mindful techniques, you want both, or at least that was my sort of audience position, right? I want the critical lens that you may have to offer on the sort of tropes of Silicon Valley startup culture, but I also kind of want the relaxing or healing potential, and you are put in an interesting position as audience member. Is like which am I getting in each moment, and there is that tension is the thing that like holds your attention to Care, right?
Well, then you're the perfect audience, Chaz.
Yeah. Well, now that I've mentioned it, I'm sure everyone listening also will perhaps read it to some extent in that same way. So yeah, there is that ambivalence, but as the program goes forward, there's some sort of clear distinctions, and there is not some sort of seething takedown of mindfulness techniques. But you mentioned that was sort of a hiccup in how you presented this to the world through advertising, which you had to do even though it's not what you normally do. Another question about that, about how it's presented, and this is also, I guess, about different points of entry. How much do you in all cases want the player of this game to know that further is a premise, and that this game is a game made by an artist named Kara Stone? Or how much would you also welcome the interpretation that the company further has offices, you know, in Mountain View and is alive and well today?
Yeah, this is a good question, and the one that I had never really been able to answer for myself, and I just still don't know like the right path for it. I'm not really interested in like tricking people, but I'm also interested in like having surprises that change kind of what their assumptions are. You know, kind of similarly, quite a few years ago, relatively, I made a game called Sext Adventure, and you would text this number, and the premise was that you'd be like sexting with a robot, or there's an automated bot responding to your texts. And so that obviously had a lot of assumptions around like, oh, this is for cisgender straight men. Like, this is obviously who it's targeted for. And I think that still like ends up being the audience that often buys it. But it like the bot ends up like questioning its gender, talking back to you, confusing body parts and like the images it sends to you, talking about like labor, inappropriate labor, and playing with the assumptions that what the audience might come there with the game.
That I think, I would, how to respond to that is that sounds entirely appropriate to not want or have to pick a lane there. Working with pseudonyms is so often not about tricking people, but just about making new lanes of artistic choices possible. And hopefully someone can, with the way that the intention behind it feels, this is not really supposed to hoodwink someone in a Andy Kaufman fashion at all, but instead it's just like a way to open up a creative space that you, the artist and audience member, can dwell in.
Yeah. In fact, I think people who might think that if anyone is getting hoodwinked in Unearth You, it's people coming to it being like, this is going to be a pure critique of wellness culture and people who are trying to, get healed, get well, feel good. In fact, that is not what it is.
So the people feeling the burn from this game are not Silicon Valley startup employees, but instead people who are hungry for seething takedowns.
Well, it is pretty critical of Silicon Valley.
That too. So we definitely talked about the Unearth You a lot because I definitely wanted to, and there's so much to unpack in it. But we do have I would like if you wouldn't mind showing us yet another project.
Yeah, I'll just actually do one question from the audience earlier, about how did the choreography of Herp Care's movement come about? And yes, I just wanted to also mention, like, part of the ethos of reuse, I used Mixamo, which is just like an Adobe animation thing where you can put up your 3D model and there's like set animation. So it was actually really difficult because a lot of those animations are made for fighting games, like a really common game, like fighting or sports games. And so there's a lot of like Care getting choked or getting shot in the head, on like the options. So like she dances a lot because it was like, oh, here's an evocative movement that she's doing that's not about violence. So kind of like a lot came to be out of necessity of like, I thought her movements originally would be much more subtle, but in fact, they're like huge and often quite silly because of that. And I think adds like a weird feel to her.
What would you say was, can you give a percentage of what your options were as to sort of like violent fight choreography versus dances or sort of nonviolent motion that was just sort of at your disposal through Mixamo?
Can you say that again?
When you sort of looked at the options out there between like fighting style movement and non-fighting, what was the sort of percentage breakdown?
Oh, if I were to say off the top of my head, it would be like 70 or 80% fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then dancing and sports, and then kind of just like idols for the rest of them. Yeah.
If there's any other questions, please keep them coming. Sorry, I had my notes over the chat. And I was just lost in a moment of conversation, but we absolutely love any questions that you have while you are watching. Anyway, could we change gears and talk about another durational game project of yours, Ritual of the Moon?
Yeah, love to.
Love to also take a look at that while we have you here. Bryce is going to play for us again.
I can give a little introduction to it. Ritual of the Moon was released like 3 years ago, which is pretty wild to me because me and the team worked on it for quite a while. I'm forgetting the years right now, but probably like 6 years from start till end, which is pretty long for a little art game. And it takes place over 28 real-time days, a longer frame that I scaled back out of necessity for Unearth You. And in this piece, kind of similarly, I think you can click in and I can see where we're at with it. Oh, great. So we have a witch here that's on the moon, and as you click on the earth, you get a reflection each day. And here she says, I can't believe they exiled me here. And so each of the 28 days, I think the majority of the storyline comes in the first 18 days. You learn more about, I'm seeing so many themes crossing over, but you learn more about the witch's history of why she is on the moon and kind of what happened to her on Earth. And you go into her spaceship here, which is on the right side of the screen. And there's like also these daily meditational tasks to do at her altar. So here we see inside her spaceship, it's like sparkling, everything's in black and white. And there's like a little bit of a memory game where there's these altar objects that one more comes each day and you have to kind of remember the pattern that they come. And then there's a connect the dots, which is just like these white little stars that you can drag your finger or your mouse over to make the shape. And yeah, so these like little practices here. So here we're kind of making an odd star shape. And then once those like the meditational activities are done, you get a mantra for the day, and this one is called I am expanding, or it reads I am expanding. Then you can click out to the right side of the screen, and then we see that through the screens in the witch's ship, there's a comet coming across the background, and there's a change in the music to make it more dramatic. And so we go out back through the left side of the screen back to our view of the Earth. And it says, I could use my magic to protect the Earth, or I could help it burn. And so you can drag the comet if you want to destroy the Earth, or if you want to have the comet avoid the Earth. It looks like we're avoiding. We love the Earth here. Oh. You can love the Earth and I guess still hate it.
Right. This is the most poetic way to find out how does Bryce feel about the world today.
Yeah, and that's kind of the concept of this piece, which is like there's small little kind of soothing or slow-paced activities and a mantra to look at, and then you make this emotional decision. And we see here a chart that has like 28 circles on it. And the first one has a spiral, which is marking that today we chose to save the Earth. And later, so after a few days of your choices, like based on the majority that you chose, the storyline diverges into different days. It takes a long time. It's like 18 days in. The storyline diverges. And then there's like 6 different endings that you can get. And so a lot of it is about tracking your emotional cycle through time and being able to like reflect back on it. And there's at day 18, you suddenly unlock the possibility to aim the comet at yourself. And so you can either hit the Earth, avoid the Earth, or have the comet hit you. And yeah, I think like 4 out of 6 of the endings, like the witch dies, like kind of a morbid, bittersweet piece. And yeah, and I guess I'll say one more thing about Ritual of the Moon. Sorry, I was just talking and not letting you ask any questions. But I haven't talked about it in a long time, so I feel excited too. The visuals are also kind of a very unique visual to video games. Like here in this piece, me and the artists Rekha Ramachandran and Julia Gingrich, who are based in Ontario, Canada, we did all handmade things, found objects or handmade things. So on my Vimeo, you can like see a creation video of like, we started with just some sewing or some like origami or other things that we scanned and then digitally manipulated. And you can even see on this screen, like the background is like soldering iron stars that I made. And then there's like a scanned motherboard and then wood burned for the rest of it. Like the circles are wood burned. And yeah, and I like sewed the text and scanned it. And it was a very long process, but I think really rewarding. And I think it's really beautiful.
When you say scan, do you mean like in a photocopier type machine or a scanner that would be built into a printer, or like a scanning app? Because I'm sure people want to know the breakdown of this unique visual style, because there's truly no other game that looks like this game.
It was a pretty good scanner. Rekha, one of the artists, it was her scanner that we used, and she is like a photographer and artist, so I think it was just a good scanner.
So, you know, there's a number of different objects that come from our corporeal world and then are brought into the world of video game asset through the art of scanning. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I was definitely going to ask about the process of creating this unique visual style. We have a lot of excellent questions for the audience, so let's get to them now. First of all, audience member asks, assuming you replay your games from time to time and you building on the reflective nature of your practice, how has today's Kara feelings feel about Kara's past reflections of the games?
This is a great question. Thank you, Bunny Steak. So I've been making art for a long time, longer than I've been making video games, and I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with my art practice. I feel like this is pretty rare for artists to say, but like I can look back at these pieces and like see the good about them. Like when we opened Ritual of the Moon 2 days ago, I was like, oh my gosh, this looks amazing. Like it's not like I just made it, so it's easy to view other people's work in that way. And see like some of the design flaws that if I were to make now, I would be like, oh, I wouldn't do that again. But that I'm like, oh, this is a piece that was like a product of its time and my life, and usually feel like really positive about them and like love and treasure them. And usually while I'm making too, I usually have a good positive relationship with the practice of making. So today, feeling good.
Terrific. That's terrific, especially so you do hear that so often and be like, oh, I can't look at my past work. Yeah. If you could, maybe you'd enjoy it.
Yeah. There's some pieces that I have taken down from the internet recently that I was like, this was more of an exercise than like a piece that I have to have up. But yeah, these are two of my biggest pieces that I spent the most time with. So I feel really good about them.
Here's another question from the audience. Someone asked, not sure if you answered this, but do you have any favorite self-care apps, even though this, meaning Unearthed You, is a commentary on the genre?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like the piece #selfcare, which is done by True Love Studio based in Toronto, and it's like very not what you would expect from a self-care app. It has like a lot of gamey like elements and tarot card pulls without any like competition, and it doesn't like stress you out. It's like purposely trying not to stress you out, and I feel like that one is really amazing and inspiring. And my favorite self-care apps are like screen time and things that like lock you out of using digital technology. So I can only go on certain apps between certain times of the day, and my partner has like the screen time passcode so that I can't ever get into them if I'm like trying to get into them, and I have like to stay focused on my computer. Those are my favorite self-care apps. I don't use any others other than those, which is the self-care is like trying to get me to not use my phone.
Right. The last self-care app you then recommend is self-care outside of the app space.
Yes, no apps. I do use actually, that's not true. For pranayama, which is like breathing exercises, I use a timer that has like, it goes off at certain intervals. So pretty basic app that I love and use every day.
What's special about the time intervals? It's just
set to that pranayama practice.
Okay, yeah. Got it. So we only have a little bit of time left. Sometimes I like to squeeze in a couple questions of my own here at the end that could relate back to the specific projects, but are just sort of about your thoughts on our field. And making games in general that I'm sort of interested in. So one thing I often want to know from those who I talk to is about locality and region and its influence on practice. So I guess, the question is, does the terroir, so to speak, of the place you are and the people in that particular geographical location imprint on the kind of work that you do in games?
Oh, I think so, definitely. Like, especially in terms of Unearthed You, and then the piece that came before it, or recent, maybe even before Ritual of the Moon called The Earth is a Better Person Than Me. I think both were, I was in California for 5 years in the Bay Area, or just south in Santa Cruz. And you can see that a lot in Unearth You, which is, it's like inspired by Silicon Valley rhetoric that's really pervasive out there. About improving your life, microdosing, mindfulness in the workplace, mindfulness so you can go back to work and like be your best self. And there's this place called Esalen Institute there, and I feel like I was inspired a lot by its website aesthetic that you might be able to see in some of the things they say and the visual aesthetic of their website. And it's this institute that I'm forgetting the details about right now, that are I don't know, so I totally forget, higher learning, cognitive learning, that human betterment sort of stuff going on there, while of course like displacing indigenous people to set up the center there. And it's also really inspired by the nature there. It's like this duality of like this extremely beautiful nature and the tech industry that kind of like is destroying nature, but kind of pushing it to other countries. Like it's not necessarily destroying the nature in California, but I was also working on this piece during the wildfires last summer, where like my university evacuated and people I know's homes burned down, and a friend evacuated to our house, like, extremely horrible and worrying, and just the worst wildfires on history. And, so very impacted by my time in the Bay Area.
Do you, now that you've made a regional shift from the Bay Area to Alberta, do you feel any initial change influences already sort of swirling around?
Definitely.
Or is it too early to tell?
I was just thinking about that last week, being like, oh, the next piece I make is going to be set in the mountains. Like the Rocky Mountains are right here in Banff National Park, and it's just like absurdly gorgeous. But also for those of you who don't know Canada very well, Alberta is like thought of the US of Canada. It's like the Texas or something, because there's like the huge oil industry. People are walking around Calgary wearing like I heart Canadian oil and gas. Like there's this kind of backlash to people wanting to, move to renewable energy and like shut down the oil sands, or, stop the mining practices, stop fracking. So yeah, I can already see that being like at the forefront of my mind and experience here.
It'll be hard to not think about that cultural dynamic while making games in that place. We have one little last question from the audience, and I don't want to miss it, so we'll take care of that, and then I think it'll be about time to wrap up. But someone simply asked, are you involved with DMG?
Yeah, so when I was talking about how I got into games, it was actually through, I went to a talk that was about women in video games at a conference, and Cecily Carver was there, who's one of the founders of DMG. And I went up to her after and was like, how can I join? Like, how do I make a game? And so that's kind of like who began my journey into making games, because I was already like making feminist art and really excited by a community that was for queer feminist people. It kind of jump-started everything.
These meetups, these communities, these skill sharing networks, these are the places that do support the work moving forward. And I hope VGA is somewhat one of those in a vast node of different places that are supporting people making games. Anyway, we're just about at the end of our hour here, Kara. Can you believe it has whizzed by so quickly? Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
I thank you for being here and letting us see your work and handling so many questions and sharing your insights on what you have made. But we can't just stop. That's not the way this works. It's on the internet, and there are rules. to the internet. And when you finish a conversation on the internet, you can do plug things. So, Kara, would you like to plug anything at all?
Yeah, definitely. Play Unearth You. It's available on Steam, itch.io, iOS, and Android. So if you have any, I would recommend to play it on your phones or tablets, but you can do whatever you want. And you can also play Ritual of the Moon, which is available on all of those things too. And you can go to my website, and I guess we also talked about Sext Adventure and The Earth is a Better Person Than Me. So those might be of interest too. Terrific.
Go out there and please play Kara's games. On behalf of VGA, I'll also plug, VGA itself. There's this program that we try to have an interview for you live every month. And if you miss the live viewing, there's an archive of all of these conversations, VGA Fireside on Twitch and YouTube. If you'd like to support VGA, please go to our website, VGAGallery.org, and buy a print. There are fine art prints made by artists who make video games, and your purchase supports both VGA and those artists. When you buy them, check out the VGA Zine. That's our monthly web publication on video game art and culture. And anything else I'm missing about what VGA is and what I should plug, Bryce? I always have to ask Bryce as last ditch effort of forgetting anything. No feedback. I think that must mean I covered it all. I think it's time to wrap things up. Let me. There's another guest. This is the thing I almost always nearly forget. Next month we will have Tanya DePass on VGA Fireside. It'll be sometime in late September. Sorry, we don't have the exact date and time, but we will post that on our website and all over the internet as soon as it's confirmed. Tanya DePass, our next VGA Fireside guest. Please, everybody, help me thank Kara Stone for joining us today. That you hear that? That's the raucous applause of the hallowed halls of the internet. And before we head out, I'm just going to make sure I thank the people who make this program possible. Thank you, Bryce Poles, the producer and director of operations for VGA. Thank you, Eleanor Schichtel, the director of communications and our designer, VGA staff, the VGA board, IGDA Chicago chapter. Thank you, Ross. Thank you to Electric Mirrors. Thank you to the Oldham Music Center Youth Brass Band for the fanfare. And again, if you know of an organization or group that would be interested in this program or have any feedback whatsoever, please drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would love to hear from you. And so now it's time for my sign off. Thank you for joining us. And from all of us at VGA Fireside, please stay warm.